This is just the beginning.
Wow, Euphoria, we meet again. It's strange to talk about a show I haven't watched or thought about in years, one that has been dormant in the darkest and most uninterested recesses of my mind. The newest trailer of Season 3 has brought back memories of a show that once saturated my high school experience and seemed to be everywhere. The trailer of Euphoria's newest season made me stop and think. I said to myself, holy shit, we're actually getting a Season 3, it's not a myth after all. With that knowledge, I wanted to rewatch Season 1 and 2 for nostalgia's sake, and to sort of jog my memory. And I have to say now, before I go any further, that the show doesn't hold up, especially under thorough scrutiny. Perhaps it does for you, but definitely not for me. It turns out that if you present a certain flamboyant style of color grading that is very aesthetically pleasing, combined with a heavy-handed and cliched take on mature themes, then you can mislead many impressionable young people into believing that you've made a show that's deep or nuanced. Never mind the glaring issues of incoherent writing, and more worryingly, narratives and characters based and centered around male fantasies that veer into an almost fetishistic lens of viewing trauma and sexuality. But hey, that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about Cassie. I wanted to look back at the video I'd made about Cassie Howard when I was a young whippersnapper at the age of 17. At 17, I had a lot of opinions which weren't necessarily the best, and I didn't always express them well. Reflecting on my video about Cassie, I realized there was much I didn't touch upon. When I spoke about Cassie and her actions, I primarily spoke about how they affected her then and there, but not nearly as much as how they would affect others and herself in the long run. And I believe that many people, including myself, were quick to give Cassie grace without considering the dangerous implications of her behavior. That is not to say she didn't deserve grace. However, the question of personal responsibility and choice comes into play, and whether change is possible after so much hurt, betrayal, and trauma. In this video, aside from reflecting on Cassie, I really want to look at specific questions like how many excuses can Cassie have? What level of agency, spite, trauma, and manipulations factor into the choices she makes? Who is given grace in fandoms? And what could possibly be next for Cassie? Take my sweaty hand and let's dive into this retrospective/rant. In the video I made in 2020 titled Cassie Howard, Villain or Victim, side note, I thought I was so smart for that title. But anyway, I made the point that Cassie was a young girl detrimentally obsessed with male validation and attention. As I spoke with my squeaky voice and scratchy microphone, I stressed that this desperate need to be seen in a desirable manner by the male sex was a product of her upbringing and negative relationship experiences, thus resulting in an insecure attachment style that later down the line led to avoidant romantic partners, abusive men, and the typical psychoanalytical daddy issues.
At first, she was really angry at her mom. She resented her for being such a hypocrite. But then, she realized that her dad wasn't perfect. She fell in love with every guy she ever dated. Whether they were smart, or stupid, or sweet, or cruel, it didn't matter.
We witnessed this with Chris McKay, a very interesting character, in fact one of the few black characters in the cast. McKay performs an unrealistic and almost reluctant version of traditional patriarchal masculinity as a protective device. He uses it as a way to bolster himself in the eyes of other men in his life, even if it means degrading women around him such as Cassie.
I feel like if we go to this party and you dress like that, I ain't gonna ever hear the end of it.
In like a good way or a bad way?
You want my advice? You fuck her like the horse she is. You kick her ass to the curb.
What have I done with Dane?
It's not like it's that big of a fucking secret, Cassie.
However, upholding such norms does not shield him from the very dangers that patriarchal harm perpetuates against men time and time again, i.e. his hazing, which was basically sexual assault. But rather than examining this harm done to McKay by the very systems he upholds on a thematic or characteristic level, we never see him again. Or perhaps we'll see him in Season 3. I don't know, probably not. But neither here nor there. Moving on, after McKay, Cassie hops over to Nate Jacobs in an unexpected, symbiotic and sordid affair. If I'm being honest, we don't have enough time to fully discuss Nate Jacobs and the themes of performative and violent masculinity, queerphobia, and repressed sexuality that shroud his character. He's an entire bag of worms that I cannot get into in one video. Just know that Cassie's transition from McKay to Nate represents an evolution in desperation and the type of trashy men a woman with poor self-esteem is ready to settle for. It has ramped up, but in a bad way. There are also racial dynamics at play in the two types of relationships and the two types of men that Cassie dates, but again, we do not have time to get into all that. Although McKay had issues as a partner, he can't compare to Nate Jacobs. Nate was truly monstrous. Nate Jacobs was committing crimes and exhibiting physical and sexual violence against the men and women in his life, but more so women. Women who you may have not noticed were typically on the outskirts of care and sympathy that society offers women. Every woman that he has ever harmed is marginalized in some way or another. He sexually assaulted Rue when they were younger, who was a young black queer woman, blackmailed Jules, a young trans woman, and physically assaulted Maddy, a young Latina woman, but not a hair on Cassie's head has ever been harmed. The typical violence used against women from marginalized backgrounds have never been used against Cassie, the white blonde woman, the woman more compatible with his fantasy of the perfect suburban American family. Nate has yet to use violence against her and may possibly never, but I wouldn't put it against him to do so in this newer season. But that is not to say he isn't harming Cassie in other ways. As we've seen, he isolates her from her friends, uses manipulative tactics, and plays on her insecurities, knowing it will bring her back to him. He is breaking her down psychologically. Those were my thoughts a few years ago regarding Cassie in Season 2, with some exceptions, such as the intersection of race. I still hold a few of those opinions, but before I get into what I think of Cassie in Season 3, based on what I've seen on the trailers, I just want to say, it's very easy for us as an audience not to be harsh on Cassie for her decisions, while also being very harsh, due to an explanation and a clear deconstruction on the way she behaves. For some, the explanation lessens the blow. For others, it worsens it. What I'm trying to say is, many of us will have different perceptions of Cassie based on factors like our race, our gender, and our life experiences. Holy shit, I'm yapping. What was I gonna say? Okay, I think I was at the point of what has changed in these last few years and what do I think differently about Cassie. I think what spurred this video and what spurred a change of mind in me was this post, and I'll see if I can find it, but I'll paraphrase for now, that said something along the lines of this. If we hate Cassie for her questionable actions based on male validation more than the abusive men in the show, then we are cooked. And we ought to think about Maddy and Jules and other female characters who have also made bad decisions in search of validation due to their fractured upbringing and being young, dumb, and naive. And to that I agree. To hate the woman who is a victim of this validation born out of long-standing patriarchal brainwashing and trauma rather than the men responsible for it and perpetuating it is very dumb. But that doesn't mean that it also isn't mingled with spite, complicity, and agency. Hear me out for a second. Cassie isn't going to be young, dumb, and naive forever. The bubble is going to burst for her. In fact, it already has, as we saw after Season 2's finale.
Hey, I'm so sorry. I had no idea.
She's your fucking sister. You know what? Pack your shit, get the fuck out of my house. I'm fucking done.
Going into Season 3, Cassie won't be a child anymore. She's already seen what Nate Jacobs is like and what he's capable of. She's probably conscious that his affections for her aren't genuine, but whether or not she wants to quit sipping the Kool-Aid is entirely up to her. Personally, I don't believe she will leave him voluntarily, and if she does, it may be due to the realization that the partnership is unsustainable rather than the fact that he is an abusive or bad person. And I can already hear you typing. In fact, I can already see the comments, victim blaming in my comment section, but hear me out and really listen for a second. We've established that Cassie can be described as a pick-me or a male-centered woman, though when I say male-centered, I'm referring to the diluted definition that has popped up on social media, not the original term of androcentrism that positions men as representatives of the human condition or experience and women and girls as the other. When I say male-centered, I mean a woman who typically devotes her entire existence to men. Every action, thought, emotion, and aspect of her life is coordinated with men or a specific man in mind. This could be happening on a conscious or subconscious level. Cassie is that and then some. Her existence is defined by a performance from men, a self-destructive ode from an artist who craves applause but is rarely acknowledged by those she seeks it from. I mean, this girl literally changed her appearance every day so that Australian Frankenstein would notice her. You can't make this shit up. Watching this tragic performance is cringeworthy and a bit pathetic, but it also does elicit some sympathy, or perhaps empathy. We've all felt like this. Cassie's quest for male validation never ends well for her. It only ever results in heartbreak and misery, but it isn't just exclusive to her, and unfortunately it goes beyond heartbreak. If Cassie's behavior only ended with embarrassment and pain for her, I wouldn't be making this video. I would just point you to my previous one and tell you to ignore my squeaky voice, but it doesn't. Cassie's desire for male attention has led her to pursue a very dangerous and toxic man. Now it's time to get into a very uncomfortable topic. Pick-me's, male-centered women, or women with very staggering levels of internalized misogyny can be very dangerous. Pick-me's, male-centered women, or those with poor self-esteem may find themselves falling in with many of the bad sort, engaging romantically with unsavory partners, men with temperaments, a dangerous side, and even men who have hurt other women. And sometimes, unfortunately, the women paired with these men will find themselves trying to justify, minimize, or dismiss said harm. We've seen this with Cassie. I repeat that we have seen this with Cassie. Cassie willingly stays with the man who strangled her friend. contextual clues show that she knows about Nate's violence. In Season 2, Nate bestows Cassie with a necklace and Cassie states that he could never scare her.
You can never scare me.
I want to repeat that. He could never scare her, implying that she knows what he did to Maddy, but it's not a deal breaker to her, and she subtly sends out a message that unlike Maddy, she can endure or tame him, which in Cassie's mind makes her the better woman. Remember, this is in conjunction with witnessing Maddy and Nate's abuse cycle and Nate's negative opinions of her prior to her relationship with him. Those are two things that would discourage any rational and well-rounded woman from even looking in Nate's direction. This was very glossed over by the fandom, or at least not talked about enough in my opinion. This interaction paints either a very fractured way of thinking on Cassie's behalf, or perhaps it paints something more malicious. I'll expand on this. Let's put it this way. In the mind of a woman like Cassie, who is either male-identified, a pick-me, or whatever you want to call it, there are 3 reasons why they could think the way they think. The first is that this woman is extremely insecure. They genuinely believe that a crappy or an abusive man who gives them attention is all they can ever achieve. These women don't believe in themselves, and it usually leads to abusive relationships. They feel unworthy and undeserving, and it's quite sad. This is probably the most sympathetic reason, whereas the other 2 aren't. The second belief is a cognitive dissonance of some kind, that a repeated pattern of behavior from a violent or an abusive man, no matter how repetitive or strong, can be broken with the right woman, that this man can be changed. Never mind the other women who are left casualties of this man's violence, because after all, she must have done something wrong. Perhaps she must have done something to provoke him. He'd never do that to me, or whatever other excuses are used to rationalize the abuse. This is followed by the third reason, which is much more frightening. These women simply and frankly don't care. They know it's wrong but choose to ignore it because it doesn't affect them. This is highly dangerous. How many times in the real world have we witnessed a male perpetrator of a heinous crime with a female accomplice? How many stories have you heard about mothers choosing their predatory brothers, uncles, and husbands over their own offspring? These women are all around us. They are not born with internalized misogyny or a drive to screw over other women or themselves. Most of the time, something has to happen. Whether it's societal and cultural conditioning, trauma, or low self-esteem, whatever it may be, it has a deeply detrimental impact on their relationships and perception of men. And once again, I understand that most of these women were probably harmed as well, and I can empathize with how this has had a strong, long-lasting, and horrible effect on them that would have brainwashed them, that in some ways could explain their behavior. But I can also acknowledge the role that women themselves play in upholding the systems of power that breed and allow for said harm to continue. We should never deny the agency that some women have when becoming foot soldiers of patriarchy and violence against women. To ignore that is to ignore reality. Look, I'm not saying that Cassie is Ghislaine Maxwell or whatever, but I'm just saying it's not out of the realm of possibility to say that Nate could virtually do anything, no matter how heinous or devious, and Cassie would still support him. She has already demonstrated that physical violence against women, including those closest to her, isn't a deal breaker. Again, think back to the scene with the necklace.
You can never scare me.
Cut that bitch off!
Coming away from Cassie and Nate for a moment, something I've always wanted to talk about that I've never spoke about in my last video is that Cassie's familial relationships weren't shit. I want to rant about this because it actually pisses me off. Suze and Lexi Howard, front and center, we need to talk about you guys for a moment. Cassie was screwed the second life dealt her an absent and cheating father. Her relationship with him had an adverse influence on her perception of men, but so did her relationship with her mother. This will ruffle many feathers as there are countless YouTube videos containing the word funny, chaotic, or slay in the title that pertain to Suze, but let's call it what it is. Suze is a neglectful drunk whose passive parenting produces significant harm to both her daughters. Suze is not a monster by any means, she's doing her best as a traumatized alcoholic, but her best simply isn't enough.
I just want to die.
Well, a corkscrew ain't gonna cut it. Oh, she needs a fucking exorcism.
Suze is very apathetic towards her daughters, especially when it comes to matters that require actual parenting or confronting uncomfortable issues, until they snowball into something that cannot be ignored, such as Cassie's abortion or her breakdown at the play. But when she does give attention to her daughters, it's very inappropriate and not proper behavior for a parent to demonstrate. With Cassie, Suze behaves more like a friend. She's unable to provide proper paternal authority, guidance, or boundaries, whereas with Lexi, she subconsciously pushes her into a caretaker role of the family or pays her less attention because Cassie is the more complicated child. And to clarify, I don't think Cassie is the more complicated child between the two. I think she's just more outwardly complicated with her issues because she's so loud about it. Suze's neglect is definitely caused by the effects of her turbulent marriage, which I can't imagine coping with while also dealing with alcoholism. But because she is stuck in her own trauma and never moving forward, she is unable to adequately focus on or look after her daughters. Which led me to a particular thought, and I may be reaching or articulating myself incorrectly, but hear me out and let me know if you agree or disagree. What do you think the current state of Suze teaches Cassie? What message do you think she's internalized about her mother, who is barely holding it together post-divorce and is still ruminating on her ex-husband? Do you think, given Cassie's track record with less than stellar men and her dependency on them, that she's learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of attaching herself to a man, unhealed trauma, and losing oneself? Or do you think she's more likely to believe that this is what her life will be like if she can't keep a man? That if she doesn't stick it through, that she'll end up on a couch with a bottle of wine and a shitty daytime TV show to keep her company? I'll let you be the judge, and you can tell me what you think in the comment section. And then we have Mrs. Shakespeare herself, Lexi Howard. Lexi, the overshadowed sister.
The story is about a 16-year-old girl, Grace, who lives in the shadow of her older sister, Hallie.
Look, I don't think much of her. I don't hate or despise her. In fact, there's a lot to be said about the dynamic between her and Cassie, which is a story for another day. One thing I've always believed, and you can disagree, is that Lexi's play and her depiction of Cassie had less to do with examining the issues in their relationship and more to do with a revenge plot that aimed to highlight and punish Cassie for her sexuality and promiscuity. Cassie is criticized in the play for her deceptive behaviors and betrayal of her closest friend, but she is especially criticized for her sexual encounters and experiences, which are framed as moral shortcomings. In fact, they are underscored for criticisms more than the other things are. I'm ranting now, but I thought I'd point that out. So back to Cassie. I want to leave off by asking what is next for Cassie. Will she be able to break out of the symbiotic hold of Nate Jacobs, who validates the insecure parts of her and feeds the attention that she requires, though at the detriment of her mental health, personal relationships, and dignity? Or has she not yet found her courage? Or alternatively, as I said before, maybe she doesn't give a fuck. Will she dig her heels in and stay by Nate Jacobs' side, and despite getting a taste of the abuse or witnessing it, resign herself to a fate that will gradually destroy her? Given Season 3's trailer, I'm inclined to believe the second option, and from there I ask, or more so worry, how much worse can it get? Not just for Cassie, but for others. Find out next time on Dragon Ball Z. Nah, I'm just joking. We'll have to wait and see, but unpopular opinion, I really don't have high hopes for Season 3. But I hope I'm wrong. If you like this video, hit the like button, don't be stingy, and maybe check out my other videos.